Before we begin, I want to welcome you to our channel. For those who are new here, our mission is to share genuine Christian testimonies from around the world, spreading the powerful message of God's kingdom. We focus on stories about Jesus, the afterlife, heaven and hell, and other Bible-related topics, bringing them to you in engaging story form twice or 3 times a week. We invite you to become a member of this family by subscribing to our channel. God bless you as you do so. Today's experience was sent to us by a dear sister. Regardless of your religion, you need to hear this shocking experience. Stay to the end of this video to fully grasp what she experienced in hell. I will begin reading as sent to us. Hi Daily Renewal. My name is Rakina. I was born into a loving family, but my life took a turn early on. My father, who was the pillar of our home, passed away when I was just a child. His sudden death left a void that nothing could fill. My mother, despite challenges, took on the responsibility of raising me all by herself. She was a devout Muslim and made sure that our home was always filled with the teachings and practices of Islam. Every morning, she would wake me up before sunrise for Fajr, the first prayer of the day. My mother was my first teacher, showing me how to perform the daily prayers, recite the Quran, and follow the principles of our faith. She would often tell me stories from the Quran and the Hadith, stories of prophets and their sacrifices, stories meant to instill in me a deep sense of faith and devotion. Fridays were special, as we would go to the mosque for Jumu'ah prayers, joining the community in worship and listening to the Imam's sermon. On the 7th of December 2023, it was a day like any other. I had just finished my morning errands and was on my way home. As I approached the zebra crossing, I looked both ways to ensure no vehicles were coming. The road seemed clear, and I felt confident it was safe to cross. I stepped onto the crossing. Suddenly, out of nowhere, I felt a powerful heat. Time seemed to slow down as I was thrown into the air. The world spun around me, and I could hear the screeching of tires and the gasps of bystanders. Pain surged through my body, and everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I found myself lying on the pavement, surrounded by concerned faces. People were shouting, and I could hear sirens in the distance. My body felt numb, and I couldn't move. I could see the sky above me, but it felt distant and unreachable. In those moments, everything became a blur. The pain was overwhelming, and I felt myself slipping away. As the sounds around me faded, a strange calm washed over me. I realized with a sinking heart that I was dying. My thoughts raced back to my mother, to my faith, and to the life I had lived. In my final moments, I prayed, clinging to the hope that my faith would guide me to the promised paradise. But as darkness enveloped me, I could only wonder what awaited me on the other side. As consciousness slowly returned to me, I felt a searing heat all around. My eyes fluttered open, expecting to see a tranquil place of rest and reward. Instead, I was greeted by a nightmare of fire and brimstone. All around me, the air was filled with agonizing screams and cries for mercy. The ground beneath me was hot, and I could feel the intense heat burning my skin. I tried to stand, but my legs felt weak, trembling with fear and disbelief. Panic gripped through me as I looked around, trying to make sense of where I was. This was not the paradise I had been promised, not the place of peace and reward I had envisioned throughout my life. Instead, I found myself in a realm of torment and suffering. The realization hit me hard. Desperation clawed at my mind as I recalled the teachings of my faith, the promises of an afterlife filled with bliss for those who lived righteously. How could this be? How could I, who had tried to live a devout life, end up in a place like this? I felt a heavy presence, and as I turned, I saw dark figures emerging from the shadows. Demons. Their eyes glowed with a light, as if they had been waiting for my arrival. I could feel their energy, and a feeling of terror ran down my spine. As they approached, my mind raced with questions and regrets. I thought of my mother, her faith, and the life we had led. Everything seemed to crumble in the face of this horrifying reality. The demons seized me with a grip like iron, their touch sending pain through my body. I struggled, but it was futile. They began to drag me deeper into the inferno. The ground beneath was hot with sharp objects and lava of fire all over, searing my skin with every step. I screamed and struggled, but it was useless. Their grip was too strong, and the pain was too intense. As they dragged me, I saw scenes of unimaginable horror all around. Souls were writhing in agony, their bodies placed in an unnatural positions. Some were being whipped by demons, their flesh torn and bleeding. Others were submerged in boiling pits of lava. Everywhere was filled with the stench of burning flesh and the sounds of endless torment. The demons dragged me past these scenes of suffering, and I knew that my fate would be no different. I was powerless to resist, and the realization that I was truly in hell began to sink in. The promises of paradise and eternal peace felt like a distant memory, a cruel joke in the face of this horrific reality. In hell, every sense was amplified to an excruciating degree. The pain was beyond anything I had ever experienced on earth. My skin felt like it was being seared by an unrelenting fire, each nerve ending screaming in agony. The air itself seemed to claw at my lungs, burning with every breath I took. Even the smallest touch from the demons sent waves of unbearable pain through my body, making me cry out in anguish. My mind was assaulted by the overwhelming sensations, making it difficult to think clearly. The screams and cries of other souls all around me, creating a suffering that never ceased. It felt like an eternity of torment, with no hope of relief or escape. I saw how hell was divided into different sections, each one reserved for a specific type of torment. As I was dragged through these sections, I saw the varying degrees of punishment given out to the souls within. In one area, souls were subjected to endless cycles of scorching heat. In another section, I saw souls being torn apart by vicious beasts, their screams filling the air as they were ripped limb from limb. The demons overseeing these punishments were relentless, ensuring that the suffering never ceased. Each section had its own unique horrors, tailored to inflict maximum pain and despair. The demons dragged me to a particularly gruesome section of hell. They roughly shoved me to the ground and began binding my wrists and ankles with heavy chains. The chains were searing hot, burning my flesh upon contact. They forced me to bend over, my body strained under the weight of the chains. The position was agonizing, every muscle in my body screaming in pain as I struggled to remain upright. I could feel the heat radiating from the ground below me, a thick, bubbling lava that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The chains kept me bound and helpless, unable to move or escape. The weight of the chains and the unbearable heat made it nearly impossible to breathe. Every breath was a struggle, every movement a new wave of torment. As I fought to stay upright, the demons took perverse pleasure in my suffering. They would push me closer to the edge of the lava, laughing cruelly as I tried to pull back. The heat from the lava was overwhelming, my skin blistering and peeling from the proximity. I could feel the molten rock licking at my feet, threatening to consume me entirely. I could see other souls in similar positions, their bodies twisted in agony as they too fought against the pull of the lava. The air was filled with their screams and cries for mercy. The demons seemed to take a special interest in my suffering, their brutal treatment even more intense than what I had seen inflicted on others. They seemed to know that my stay in hell might be temporary, and they were determined to make every moment as painful as possible. As the demons dragged me further into the depths of hell, I was thrust into a new section. This area felt even more oppressive, the heat more intense, and the air thick with an overwhelming sense of despair. It didn't take long for me to realize that this was a place specifically reserved for those who had not believed in Jesus. Among the tormented souls, I realized most my eyes saw were Muslims. I could hear the unmistakable tones of regret and anguish. They cried out, not just from the physical torment they were enduring, but from the deep sense of betrayal and deception they felt. I could feel their despair resonating deep within me. The promises of paradise and eternal peace, the very foundations of our faith, seemed like distant and cruel illusions in the face of this harsh reality. It was a bitter pill to swallow, knowing that everything we had believed in and strived for had led us to this place of eternal suffering. In the midst of this overwhelming despair, I found myself questioning everything I had ever believed. The cries of my fellow Muslims, their expressions of regret and sorrow, is loud in my mind, amplifying my own sense of hopelessness. In the midst of my relentless suffering, something extraordinary happened. I noticed a figure approaching through the haze of torment and fire. The figure was a man, dressed in a simple, unassuming garment. His presence was calm. He moved with a grace and dignity that set him apart from the demons and the anguish around me. The heat seemed to lessen as he drew closer, and a sense of peace began to wash over me, despite the continuing pain. The demons, who had been so merciless and cruel, seemed to recoil from his presence, their faces twisting in confusion and anger. As the man approached, the demons stepped back, their expressions shifting from mocking cruelty to apprehensive unease. It was as if his very presence had the power to command their attention and force them to yield. Their cruel laughter faded, replaced by a tense silence. They stood aside, allowing the man to come closer. The chains that had bound me began to feel lighter, and the oppressive heat seemed to diminish, just slightly. The man reached out and took my hand gently, his touch both soothing and powerful. His eyes held a depth of compassion and understanding that I had never encountered before. With a voice that was calm and filled with authority, "I am the way, the truth, and the light," he said. "No one comes to the Father except through me." The moment he finished speaking, the man began to turn away. His departure was as peaceful as his arrival had been, leaving behind a sense of calm and resolution. I felt the oppressive chains fall away from my wrists and ankles, and the fiery heat of hell seemed to recede. In an instant, I was no longer in the inferno. The man had taken me away from the realm of torment, leaving behind the suffering and the despair. His intervention had brought a sudden end to my nightmare, and I found myself in a different place, filled with light and a sense of hope. I opened my eyes, and the first thing I noticed was the sterile whiteness around me. I was lying on a hospital bed, my body covered in a crisp white sheet. The change in surroundings was wow after the fiery depths of hell I had just experienced. The pain that had consumed me was gone. I was surrounded by medical staff who were busy attending to me. As I took in my surroundings, the memories of my ordeal began to flood back. The chains, the searing heat, the demon's laughter. Everything came rushing back with vivid intensity. It felt as though I had just been pulled from a nightmare, but the fear and suffering lingered in my mind. A nurse noticed my awakening and immediately came to my side. She checked my vitals and asked me how I was feeling, her voice gentle and reassuring. I struggled to speak, my throat dry and my words coming out in a shaky whisper. The nurse explained that I had been unconscious for about 4 hours. She seemed puzzled by the lack of any clear medical explanation for my sudden awakening. In that moment, I realized that my return to life was nothing short of a miracle. The divine intervention I had witnessed, the man in the simple garment and his words, had somehow pulled me back from the brink of eternal suffering. The experience had changed me profoundly, and I knew that my life would never be the same again. I found myself facing a choice: to cling to the beliefs that had brought me nothing but torment, or to seek something profoundly different. I chose the latter. I reached out to Jesus Christ via a church. I decided to become committed, and I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. It was not a decision made out of fear, but out of a deep understanding of His love and grace. The encounter with the man in the simple garment had shown me the way to salvation, and I embraced it wholeheartedly. Since that moment, my life has been transformed. I have experienced a love that never ends, a peace that surpasses all understanding. The weight of my past sins has been lifted, and I have found solace in the embrace of a Savior who forgives and renews. The love of Jesus Christ has been a constant source of strength and comfort, guiding me through every trial and triumph. I'm not here to cause conflict or argue about beliefs. I simply want to share my experience and the profound change it brought to my life. If you haven't yet received Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior, I urge you to consider it. The torment that awaits those who reject Him is beyond anything you can imagine. I've seen it firsthand, and it's brutal. I was given a second chance, a gift that I cherish deeply. And to be honest, sometimes I joke about it, saying that I must have really made an impression on the other side to get such an extraordinary do-over. But the truth is, this second chance is the most precious gift I've ever received. It's a chance to live a life full of love, hope, and grace, rather than one filled with despair and torment. So, I extend this invitation to you. Don't wait for a dramatic encounter or a near-death experience to make the choice. Embrace Jesus now while you still have the chance. His love is real, and it is here for you, always. Thank you. All right, friends. Thank you for staying to the end of this experience. Kindly like and share this video. If you have not subscribed to our channel, kindly do so to remain updated whenever we upload new experiences sent to us. Till our next meeting, remain blessed